You're listening to a VerySpatial podcast, episode 735, April 7th, 2024.
Hello, and welcome to a VerySpatial podcast. I'm Jesse.
I'm Sue.
I'm Barb.
And this is Frank.
And this week we're going to be talking about some stuff. But first, some news.
Researchers from the University of Bundeswehr Munich have been able to create a height map for a 3D city using just one single radar image. This is something that they plan to use for quick disaster response and planning. It's still not perfect, but it is a way to quickly respond to humanitarian aid in the future.
I think this is, creating 3D maps, we're recognizing how valuable they are, but the gold standard using LiDAR is really expensive and not everybody can do it. So this particular imagery used SAR data, so synthetic aperture radar data. And potentially this means a way to do some of these projects without having to always go in for the expensive LiDAR. So a lot of places can't actually afford that. So I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, the cool thing is it happens very quickly, which is, as they note, for emergency response, you can use a SAR captured image that had been captured in the last day, week, month, whatever it may be, to quickly get something developed, because they're basically leveraging AI and machine learning to do it, which is, really neat.
So university researchers in the Sahel region are working with the IAEA, that's the International Atomic Energy Agency, to use isotopes to start mapping groundwater. This is pretty cool because it's going to allow them to get a lot more information on rivers, lakes, and the underground aquifers.
And of course, with climate change, with all kinds of other pressures and water demand growing, this is a huge issue in the Sahel region of Africa. If you're not sure, that this is the area to the southern borders of the Sahara Desert where that environment transitions. Well, okay. I can't remember what it transitions into all of a sudden.
Well, the northern grasslands that butt up against the
I was going to say
rainforest.
uplands, but that's only on the eastern side, so that's my bad. Yeah.
And actually, it doesn't really impact the uplands as much because of orographic lifting and the... never mind.
Anyway, my regional geography left me for a second.
What's really interesting is this is a transboundary partnership. And as we know, water doesn't have boundaries. So they're going to be able to build on connecting everyone's data from previous work into building this.
I think the fact they're using isotope hydrology, which just sounds cool, no matter what you're doing.
Just by putting isotope in front of it?
I think so. I think it's like a hydrospanner. It just sounds cooler than it really is.
Also, things that people should be mindful of, not necessarily news items, but for those folks who are in high school going into college, and those people who are in college, and those people who are in grad school, the annual specifically USGIF, U.S. Geospatial Intelligence Foundation scholarships are open and have been since January, but they're due maybe May 31st, but check the website to make sure.
It's coming up.
Yeah.
So now's the time to, if you're going to do it, really think about it, if you've not already done so.
Yeah. And we know people who have gotten them. It is for the USGIF. So you think it's GeoInt, but they do look at geospatial broadly. So any way that you're creating new ways of understanding geographic information, geospatial information, geospatial intelligence information, any of those fall under what they're looking for. So again, it's one of those where it's always better to apply and, be in the running than not. So if you qualify.
I was looking to see because I think the NASA Develop is also still open or might have just closed.
And what is that?
It is similar in that it is a geospatial internship with NASA. We know several people that have done that and worked with them. It's an interdisciplinary program that focuses on earth science and earth observation. And it's open to U.S. citizens and non-citizens.
And of course, if you're interested in REUs, it's too late. Almost all of their deadlines have closed by now. So keep that in mind for next year. And you can look for research experience.
Research experience for undergraduate.
So another thing in the news, which is very important to at least half of VerySpatial, is that researchers are now predicting that in the United States, the Atlantic hurricane season is going to be probably much worse than it normally is. They're forecasting up to 23 named storms, which is normal, which is 50% above normal. So normally it's about 14 or so named storms and 11 hurricanes. That's a lot. What's driving this is essentially what everyone knows about or should know about is sea warming, temperatures that are ridiculously high compared to how they have been in the past, and they just keep getting worse and worse. That in and of itself is not sufficient to generate this degree of uptick. You also have low wind shear, which is something that basically destroys storms as they form. So basically the heated seas are going to make them more likely to form, and then normal wind shear would cut a lot of them off before they got anything of note. But since it's low wind shear for various reasons, it's unlikely that they're going to, reduce the number of those storms that come out. So
yeah, kind of expected this with a La Nina year. So La Nina years generally have a few more hurricanes, and so we're just kind of waiting to see what happens. That was Colorado State's.
Yes, I believe. Yeah,
Colorado State. I can't remember if it's Colorado State or Colorado Springs. Their model, and there'll be a few other ones that come out in the near future. But that's kind of the go-to most years. Does fairly well, and they'll do an update as we start getting more into the season in early June. But
yes, and there are some other factors that come into play as well to see. So one of the ones I always am interested to see the kind of forecasts and observations of is the Saharan dust clouds.
Yeah,
that come across the Atlantic and stuff. I find that they often throw a wrench in the works, dampen stuff down.
Which, because of El Nino last year, there should be more dry conditions in large portions of that area, which could potentially lead to more dust, but we don't know.
But it depends on the strength of the winds bringing it out.
So without
complex.
The wind shear, you may not get the lift of you may not get the aeolian activity. Yeah, lots of things.
We'll be ready though. We have our remote learning plans in place that we must all file because Jesse and I are faculty at a near coastal university. We're about 12 miles from the ocean. So
near
we
coastal.
do in fact have to deal with this. And we have clothes for them. We have, knock on whatever this table is made out of, we've had some close shaves since we've been here.
There's wood in there somewhere.
But aftermath flooding was our biggest impacts.
Yeah. And even whenever I was still in North Carolina at my school there.
That's correct.
We would close for these as well.
Yes.
But,
so
yeah.
Perhaps the force field will hold.
Why would you threaten the force field like that?
I gave the appropriate.
You said maybe, and then you didn't knock after you said
time.
that one. Yeah. Each statement requires its own.
I will make the appropriate offerings.
There's no
after the podcast.
There's no blanket knock. You gotta,
And that's it for the news. And this week we have no idea what we're going to talk about, so we're just going to talk because it's April. If depending on where you are, you just saw March come in like a lion, out like a lamb. We're getting ready to have April showers, bringing us May flowers. Of course, those of us further south have had flowers for a while now. So,
we had flowers, lion, lamb, flowers, lion, lamb, like for the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks or something like that. So it's been very confusing, and I feel bad for the vegetation because it bloomed 21 days early this year, and then frost came along and said nope, and then there's rain, and then there was cold, and then this week it's going to be warm and rainy. Nobody knows. And then they're predicting next week is cold again. So it's crazy.
It's hard to see the trend line when you're in it.
Yeah.
It's basically Puxatawny Phil was feeling schizophrenic this year.
Yeah.
It's his shadow, at least. Sorry. Was shivering.
Yeah. We had snow in Thursday, I think it was Thursday or Friday was one of those 2 days we had a little bit of snow, which is not unusual. And I know this is not unusual because one of my favorite songs to listen to whenever it snows is Sometimes It Snows in April by Prince. And I invariably end up listening to that song most years than not. But given the amount of early bloom that we had, it was a little surprising how much snow we got.
We had an overnight temperature last night in the 30s. No, it'll probably be like 70 today, but we are seeing some. And of course, the high stakes weather forecasting of the eclipse viewing is going on now, the last minute, as they're starting to predict cloudiness and potential rain for some of the parts of the totality corridor.
So you guys are what, 90-some%?
90 something. Yeah. It's going to be 70 and cloudy tomorrow. So we'll get to see the effects of it. I mean, that's a pretty good eclipse.
Yeah. We're only in the 70-some% totality.
Yeah, my glasses came in right in time. They came in yesterday.
Yeah.
Recommended by the space gal, Emily Kellandrelli, who's from Morgantown, that does that show.
I have the welder's goggles thing, and I got them for last time. And so here's where the forecast comes into play: is that it was broken cloudy, but over us in Conway area, some clouds came through, dampened the fun. But if you went further south in South Carolina, they got a nice clear view. So the clouds do matter.
Or if you went a little bit further north and west to North Carolina.
Was yours cloudy then? No. See, you got to see it great, but we did. I went out for a while. I mean, it was still neat because it got dark and everything. But this was 2017, I think was when.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I felt slightly robbed. I mean, I had the welder's goggles and everything.
I didn't know welder's goggles would work because I've got mine.
Yeah, they.
You have to have the thickest lenses, the number 14 or whatever scale 14. Basically the thickest ones that you can get for them.
Yes. So, literally when you put them on, you can see nothing outside of them. So you have to go to your position and then put them on.
Yeah, having used those for actual welding, it's always fun because with welding, you've got to if you're doing stick welding, you have to get the stick at the right place, but you literally can't see anything. And you're like, I think that's right. And then it comes on and you go, no, that's wrong. So,
Hence the folks who learn how to do the lean forward and have it come down, look, place, put it down.
Yeah. It renders you effectively blind until that light hits. So,
well, I tried them on in the corridor of our office, and there were at least 3 people there laughing at me, and I had no idea who or where they were until I removed the goggles, of course.
And this week, too, I've had 2 instances of having to give people the link to the Did You Feel It, the USGS for earthquakes, because the one was the earthquake that happened in Ohio, right near the Ohio-West Virginia border, that apparently everyone's reporting for Ohio, but no one's really reporting for West Virginia. And people are trying to figure out, well, the geologic survey, what does this mean? And then one that happened in my hometown in New Jersey, right there where I grew up, that made the news, and sending everyone the link for Did You Feel It, which I always appreciate the science communication side of that they make it just very clear on, how to report it and make it fun to find. I think Australia's is Did It Shake or something like that is what they use for you to find theirs.
Let's see, what else is coming up in April? Tax Day. So,
which I haven't done mine yet. So, I'm well aware that there's a deadline looming that I have to get
in the U.S. It's tax day.
Yeah, in the U.S.
Yes.
A week from Monday.
Yeah.
So, in fact, it's possible that most people will not hear this until well after tax day. Yes. So, hope you got it done, or filed an extension, or in another country where it's not April 15th.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question that has nothing to do with any of the things going on in April. This just recently came up in subreddit for professors, I think is where it was at, that there was complaints about students not knowing how to use files and folders. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a very interesting. The number of what I found interesting about it is the number of professors who presumably use their phone and their cloud-based devices and that sort of thing that similarly do not use files and folders, but don't really take into account that students
never needed to.
Yeah. And so they're always kind of aghast that students don't know how to do that. And I actually was a little aghast that professors were surprised by this, because why would you? I mean, if you do cloud stuff, you don't have to even, it just goes into a magic cloud space and you don't know where it's located or why.
Well, but I mean, we still say, create a file to keep things together in the cloud. And so you kind of think people would organize. No,
No.
I mean, they don't
No.
generate as much as you would think.
Yeah, and the conversation is even changing, right? So those you'll remember on earlier episodes years back at the podcast where I said one of the things that shocked me is that people didn't know what a zip file was, right? So we've well progressed beyond that now to where I don't think they don't understand even any of that structure in the sense of files and folders, right, as part of it, but the fact that there's something stored somewhere and it might be on the computer, might not be on the computer, because now they're shocked if something happens and say a folder gets wiped. They're like, what do you mean it was on the computer? Can't I just log into my account and get it back? No, that's gone. You see how that folder says empty now? Gone.
You know how since the first day of class we said make
Yeah.
sure to save it to the D drive because they like to wipe the C drive occasionally? This is why.
Yes, and when we say wipe, we mean gone, like physically from the space.
Those bits are not backed up anywhere.
Well, it kind of surprised me. My coworker, now he comes from a strong, the position he had before, position he has now. He was a trainer for Microsoft enterprise level things. So he's, his knowledge base is very strongly attuned to what Microsoft does. And he does a lot with SharePoint, for example. And that's sort of how he approaches a lot of this enterprise level stuff. So it was interesting to me to watch him trying to find a piece of information, and he was doing searches based upon what he called the file, which is completely legitimate. I'm not suggesting that was weird or anything like that, but I thought, well, that's kind of interesting because I don't actually pay that much close attention to what I name files. I pay a lot more attention to where I saved files. So the way I organize my brain isn't so much that I don't worry that I've named this Project X meeting notes. Meeting notes, but it's in Project X folder. So I know that hierarchy exists, and I just got to look in that folder, and it's somewhere in there. I'm going to find a file that is descriptive enough that I know what it's about, project plan or whatever it may be. Whereas his more approach was a little bit making sure that his files were holistically named so he could find them in a search and trying to remember what he named things. And it neither is wrong. It struck me, well, that's really interesting. It's just the way he organizes, the way he thinks about it. It's very different than how I organize how I think about it. And it was something that struck me because shortly thereafter I saw that discussion on the professor subreddit.
Which, of course, for GIS doesn't matter. On ArcGIS Online, maybe you can get away with just naming. But as we know, every project that you save in ArcGIS Pro, it's going to have a folder. And if you move that folder and you don't move every other folder you reference along with it, then you're going to kill the
Everything
relative path. Now, the problem is there's also this difference that those people who are coming from ArcMap who are used to the not relative path, unless you go in and specifically chose it, aren't maybe necessarily thinking of ArcGIS Pro and the relative path mindset. So it's a different, But hopefully, of course, everybody's moved away from ArcGIS or ArcMap now to ArcGIS Pro or whatever they have moved to.
Narrator, they have not.
Yeah. Yes. And I think, although I think for today, like it's too much to get in depth, but this conversation is kind of an interesting tangential lead into stuff that I've been thinking about a lot more. And that is the change in how GIS is being done. Right. And we've talked about it. It's been happening. I mean, it changes not just at Esri, but other places. I think it is a question for us because we're in the transition, right? We remember the old times. A lot of us still do things with the old times, but for those of us in education, the students that are coming to us don't have any attachment to that world. And the things that they're seeing, right, the things they're used to working with are in fact different. And so your options are to go back and kind of backfill in some of the older things that we take for granted, like explaining, okay, so you're working on a desktop computer. These are the things that must happen for you to be successful, versus do we then evolve and say, well, increasingly things are being done over the web. They're being done with these types of things, remote processes, all this kind of stuff. And so I find myself struggling with the which way to go with this. I do some of each, But, again, it's a broader question that I keep wrestling with. And I don't know if I want to give it the term modern GIS or whatever, but I do think that the question is, how much do I try to go back and say, look, this is how you do these other things because this works this way, but there's less and less chance you're going to see this out in the working world. Maybe it's because I'm not as connected to the working world anymore to know how many people out there are actually making this transition themselves or coming into it new and using tools that aren't what we would consider traditional GIS.
Actually, what I'm finding is that a lot of my students are already working, a lot of them, and they are seeing themselves as the professionals that are bringing that transition in, because it's the organizations they're in aren't necessarily, even though you have to make that transition, there are a lot of people that still are thinking that they don't have to or can find a way around it.
Around what?
The switch over to the cloud and in ArcPro.
Well,
future
to the modern
the inevitable movement of technology and time. They're immune to it. That's and what I'm finding from our professional organization side of things is I'm finding a lot of people who they do a thing and the thing works, so then they keep doing the thing that works, which is fine if you're doing woodworking or something like that. But when it comes to technology like this stuff is evolving whether you want it to or not. And one of the things that I find a little frustrating about this is the companies mostly have a vision that they're pushing that I'm not sure they've entirely tested completely. And they're kind of like, well, I don't mean by test, does it work, not work, as in, is this a approach that makes a lot of sense? And they're saying, we're going to do it this way. And then people go, I don't understand how to get my brain around that to do it that way. And I think we're doing a lot of live testing of concepts in not just GIS, but more broadly in technology now.
I think we've gone from a very small group of people who are learning and using technologies early days. And, there are people who, including ourselves, some of us that were still doing, command line, ArcGIS, 7 point, whatever, whenever we started. And so we went through ArcView. We went through ArcMap objects, not ArcMap object, just map objects. We went through ArcMap and its various iterations. And now we're in ArcGIS Pro. But the thing is that there are a lot of people who aren't those people. And so I think that's the difference now, is that we have this core that was new and heavily into the early changes in the industry. And keep in mind, at that point, the industry technically was already 30 or more years old, whenever we're talking about the late 90s. And so now we have this broad breadth of people who have entered at different points. And so there are people who have been in the profession and are getting ready to retire that didn't deal with things that I've dealt with whenever I started.
Well, yeah, I think that's true. I don't know. I don't disagree with you at all. You're absolutely right about that. But I just find it a little bizarre. And admittedly, I'm coming from a point of view of being a heavy technologist. Show me the latest whiz bang thing and I want to play with it. Yeah. So it is a biased point of view, but I am very surprised still to this day the number of people who look at this stuff as a static tool.
No, I agree.
Considering how much it's changed just since we started the podcast, which is a relatively short period of time in most careers. So I find that a little bizarre, that you don't sort of accept as a norm of the role that you're going to have to do it different in 5 years, whatever it is you're doing. And I'm also impressed. I'm very impressed, actually, with the sheer number of people I see that don't do it different in 5 years, that are able to just keep doing it. I'm like, that's amazing that you can keep doing that and it works for you, which is both a testament to the resiliency of the technology and also the resiliency to change.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we have so many different takes on it at this point that it's just, we're all baffled. And at the same time, we're all confused why other people are baffled.
I was going to say, I just got back from an open education resource conference where both the state and the national groups involved with open education were talking about it. And one of the things I noticed was, and highly appreciative of, is that for me, a lot of what I'm doing and working with finding and creating, it's not brand new to me. It's not something that I have to think, is this worthwhile doing? Because the geospatial community has been very good because of these changes. I think about doing a lot of open education and discussion and help. I mean, I know I can go to YouTube, I can go to videos, I can go to GitHub, I can go to Substack. There's so many places now, but they've always been where the community's been willing to basically step people through these changes so that you can adapt quicker. I know I can go somewhere and no one's going to make me feel that, I'm dumb for looking and asking, because I'm going to ask a whole lot of questions. Yeah, the majority of people, it's a very, I said, we've been in this sphere, in the open education for professionals and students for, the community a long time. It's a very, very open community. So I think that is also what lends itself to being able to adapt and change, is finding resources that you don't have to pay for.
Well, and I think that very mindset, right, is also, and I'm going to try to, in my mind, it's taking me a second to kind of connect it back to when I'm thinking about some of these transitions, right, is that very mindset, right, that there's all these resources, there's all these things out there, I can go get it, also affects kind of, or goes hand in hand with the changeover in mindset, right? So one of the things that I also see is happening is, at least when we first encountered GIS, right, and geospatial, it was, again, as Jesse was saying, much smaller community, right? And the way that you passed on what you knew was among your select group, right? And I don't mean select, I'm trying not to mean that in a bad way. It just means a smaller group of people. And so the knowledge got passed on. The core of what you did was at a physical computer, right? The web part of it came later, and it was, it was kind of a rough, rough transition into some of that stuff. And so there was very much ownership, and you go through your whole career, right, doing it the same way because it worked, and you were trained by someone else how to do it, whether you got that in formal education classes or training on the job. And so that sense, right, that everything, and that I think, and Frank, you can correct me on this as somebody who's also, been in technology even longer than me, or, Jesse, and just that notion that where are my files, I need to know where my data is, I need to know where my results are, right? I have an ownership on that. I don't feel comfortable unless I can backtrack and do those types of things, right? That has evolved as we've seen connections and cloud, the rise of cloud and all that. And so, again, I think the next generation down doesn't really have necessarily that attachment, right? Where I freak out, like, I don't know.
Where's my floppy disk?
Yes, right. I don't know where the data was that created this result layer. So I have to have that, or I don't really trust it. But as we change to other things, right, there's less ownership. But like, some users now don't even ask where to go or where did I get that layer. They just pull in anything. And, we try to educate about things like metadata and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't resonate like it did, I don't think. And this is just, again, my experience with it, trying to explain why this is important. I mean, there'll be an understanding. Oh, obviously, if I create a data layer after 2011, it will have South Sudan on it, and prior to that, it won't, right? Because it was an independent country. Something obvious like that there will be an understanding of why these types of things matter. And again, I'm just pulling out one tiny example of this whole change. But I think that some of it too in that evolution, right, is the notion of something we've talked about for the entire podcast, right? Which is, how this synthesizing and reworking and everything of sources, of perspectives and stuff that is allowed by sharing everything, it just goes all the way through the GIS world, the geospatial world as well.
I recently got made fun of for hitting save.
It isn't that like a small microcosm example of this, right? Yeah.
It was, and in fairness, we were doing, working on a Word document online, and it just saves. It just does. It takes care of that, and I don't have to hit the save button. But I can't not hit the save button. I've learned that about myself. I've evolved to the point where no, I have to hit the save button. That way, I know it got saved.
I don't know how. Completely off topic, but our IT has found a way to turn off the autosave feature in Word and all of the Office.
Well, yes, we have the exact opposite. It's always saving in real time, which I
because of versioning. So they've also basically found a way to locally. So if you're doing it in the cloud, yeah, you're versioned, you're good. If you're doing it locally, it's not doing versioning the same way because it's not actively saving.
Yeah, and so versioning is a thing that I like having an active hand in. So I will remember, oh yeah, version 17, I was going on this tangent. So I need to go back to version 16. And so I like positive stops that I understand what the degrees of change might be. Whereas this constant saving thing confuses me, because what'll happen is that, as an example, is I may rework a paragraph and then the next paragraph punch it up a little bit and then go back to the paragraph before that other paragraph and say, oh, I got to make some word changes. And then I realize, oh, that third paragraph I edited on is all wrong. I need to delete it. So I need to keep pieces of it, or, so if I hit starting Control Z, I end up undoing things that I didn't want to undo in this need to get to the thing that I do want to undo. I personally find it easier to control that versioning, but you don't do that in the cloud. And it's very hard for me to switch to that mindset.
You still can.
Yeah, you can, but
you have then the backup. Because the versioning I want is for the backup, not for the change in ideas. That I agree. You created a copy of that, but I want something where if I accidentally do something to a portion of the document I didn't mean to, and I close it and come back to it, which means that it's no longer in the undo list, then I can go back to the version and open up that old version where this could be just like, a one-page letter. It doesn't need to be a multi-page document where versioning really does, having different copies are important. Just being able to say, oh, wait, this sentence I had in here is gone. It was a really great sentence. How do I get back to that? Now versioning allows me to do that.
Yeah, I like that too. But also, I think I'm in Frank's camp, right? I like active. So that's why
it's both.
on the
it's
gaming
not either
console
or for me.
Yes. But on the gaming console, why there's 15 saves of the same game, because I see it saving, but I want my control. I want to know it happened. So I want to actively see the event happening.
Well, and I want to know that I can go back to this if I, spam myself in the next iteration. I can go back a couple of saves and fix it.
Yes. But that is, I think, but there's a whole group that doesn't even see that as like something to take into account. Yeah. And that is a very different mindset.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I like having both, but because of the degree of activeness, it's harder for me to trust the automatic thing other than the very last version. Like, let me go back to the very last thing. It's harder for me to understand what has changed in the versioning going back to some extent. So that's where, if I have the positive stops, I know exactly what's going on. And that's just easier for me to wrap my brain around, per se. Plus, I hate hitting Control Z 87 times in a row to get back to, I have a bad habit of, when writing, for example, I'll write a sentence and I'll delete part of it, and then I'll write some more, and then I'll delete the bit that I wrote. I'm completely rewriting it as I go, and I'll end up with like 19 versions of one sentence, and then I'll realize, oh, that whole sentence is garbage. So I need to go back to before I started, that type of thing. So it makes it a little harder for me to hit. Anyway, I understand both are useful and I want both, but at the same time, I'm running into, in the work environment, the versioning that I'm used to, where I have my own positive stops, is lesser used than just trusting the online versioning thing. And that's hard for me to use both, using only one and not the other.
So yeah, there's a conversation for the day, and hopefully you
found something useful.
Stuck around to this point.
Yeah, I think we are going to circle back around to maybe another more specific conversation about evolving GIS, because I think that GIS, geospatial, because it does have a lot more implications to it.
You should head on and find out about some events in the events corner.
First up, State of the Map 2024 will be taking place September 6th to the 8th in Nairobi, Kenya. A call for the academic track is due May 10th.
Agile 2024, which is the Association of Geographic Information Laboratories in Europe, is holding its annual conference focused on geographic information science for a sustainable future in Glasgow, UK, June 4th through 7th.
And Geography 2050 is taking place November 22nd to the 24th in New York City.
The city's so nice, they named it twice.
That's right.
If you'd like us to add your event to the podcast, send us an email to podcast@veryspatial.com.
If you'd like to reach us individually, I can be reached at sue@veryspatial.com.
I'm Barb at VerySpatial.com.
And you can reach me at frank@veryspatial.com.
I'm available at jesse@veryspatial.com. And of course, you can find all of our contact information over at veryspatial.com/contact.
As always,
We're the folks from VerySpatial.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you in a couple weeks.